Don't join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for showing up and being here. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here?
I just moved from Seattle to San Diego.
All the way just to be at the Dharma Bum Temple. That's very
Yes.
nice of you.
This little movie.
Right on. You were in Seattle one day and said, you know what, there's a Dharma Bum Temple in San Diego, I gotta go.
Check it out, better pack the car.
Right on. Well, we're glad you made it. Welcome, welcome. Wait, just arrived this morning or?
No, about a month ago,
Okay.
and then I heard about you from a friend of mine. So,
Nice.
Yep.
I'm glad you're here.
thank you.
How do you like San Diego so far?
I'm getting acclimated, and the more that happens, the more I'm enjoying it.
For sure.
But I need a sangha, so.
Yeah.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? Well, if I think of a good one, I will let you know. Welcome. And what's your name?
Norma,
Norma. Welcome to San Diego.
thank you for your welcome.
Yeah. First time here.
Yeah.
Oh, you stayed. You said you could go check out upstairs, and here you are.
Went on a different pathway on my walk today.
Yeah.
So it's like, so just
You could have just ruined the rest of your life, you know? It's
It's
funny,
That's what they life's meant to be experienced. So.
right? Can you say that louder?
Oh, life's meant to be experienced. So
Yeah.
why not?
Don't we get stuck in our life sometimes? Completely stuck in just our routines, our way of life, our habitual thought patterns, behaviors, and we don't even realize that we're just stuck doing the same thing day in and day out. Day in and day out. And if you're happy and peaceful and everything is great, then great. But, that's not the case for a lot of people, unfortunately. At least those that typically show up around here. Now, I'm not saying you're not all happy, peaceful people, but, we do. We get stuck. And sometimes just taking a completely different path. Literally, metaphorically, whatever that means, is important. But when we take a different path, it can be what sometimes? Scary and I heard painful. Scary and painful. Yeah. And sometimes the comfort of sitting in our misery is where we stay. And that's not really a way to live our lives. I mean, for me, Buddhist practice is for me personally, a pretty intense way of living. But the Buddhist teachings as a whole are really meant to help you find joy and happiness in your everyday life. And yet, sometimes we just stay stuck. And we're miserable and we're unhappy, but we're comfortable. And so we're afraid to kind of peel away what it is that we need to peel away to be happy. And that process of peeling away can be really painful. But what's waiting for us, what's ahead of us, what's on the other side of the pain and discomfort and fear is a life that can be really pleasant and joyful. But man, it's scary. And we'll stay stuck for years in whatever it is without, sometimes never, without ever having the courage to just remove ourselves. So, yeah. Well, thanks for taking a different random journey. What was your name?
Lindsay?
Lindsay. I feel like I should fill people. Lindsay just roamed into Buddha for You like 20 minutes ago and said you were on your walk, right?
Yeah,
Just on a walk. And you roamed through the store and then almost felt like you were about to leave. And I just said, you can go check out the temple upstairs if you want. And I think you said like, oh, there's a temple? Or yeah.
where I was.
Yeah.
So, and everything's just so beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah.
And then talk to the lady at the front,
Yeah, Robin.
Robin.
Yeah. She had the badge on, said Dharma Boom host. Yeah. So, and then here you are. So yeah, so I like things like that because we never know what can, I mean, 45 minutes from now, you might say, well, that was the worst thing in my life. But, either way, you can cross it off your bucket list, So thanks all for being here. We'll start with the meditation practice. Oh my God. So Brad just wanted to share that he just installed a home theater projector and he feels like he's here with us at home. So specifically, it's 180 inches on his wall. So
Life size.
So life size. so there we are. Yeah. So thanks all virtual friends for joining us. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with sounds and chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos, not escaping from it. So posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the ground or cushion, often helps. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, just trying to sit up straight as well. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. So simply move, return to stillness. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing, but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people might think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is filled with conflict, frustration, disappointment, challenges. This is life. And what we've spent most of our lives doing, many of us, is running from all of those things. And this practice is learning to sit with life as it arises. We spend so much time trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us. Once we stop trying to do all of that and work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it does take time. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. Buddhist teachings are really quite simple, pretty direct, pretty practical, and really hard to put into your life every moment. Ultimately, what it comes down to is becoming aware and mindful of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. Without judging and critiquing yourself and everybody else for everything you or they think, say, and do. Now, I know none of you would ever judge anybody else, so I'm not so worried about that. But it starts with that awareness. What is it that we're thinking? What is it that we're saying? And what is it that we're doing? And for many years, that can just be your practice. Just the awareness. This is your karma. Karma literally means action. Karma is not getting what you deserve. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is simply action. So to be mindful of your karma, your thoughts, your words, and your actions throughout the day. That practice is a lot of fun. So I think I'll just pause there. And for me, really, I just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. For Brad, it's probably quite a large chat box. I did the quick math. Like that's over. You weren't kidding. Life size. That's over 10 feet, right?
15.
15 feet. That made me real tall. So yeah, thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll go from there.
Do you use noting in your meditation, or do you not?
So the question is, do I use noting in my meditation? Just to clarify one, so we're on the same page, and just for anybody else, by noting, do you mean recognizing thought, note it, move on, note it, move on? Is that kind of by noting, like the recognition of a thought or feeling,
Of
sensation?
of breathing and
Yeah.
and emotion.
Yeah, it's really funny. Years ago, we had somebody leading meditation for us for a while, and I will probably answer your question in a minute. And he said he had a practice of the recognition or noting of thoughts as they would arise. And what he would do is he would with his finger, he would kind of tap his knee, right? Every time a thought arose. And one day, he was leading, and however I was situated, and for me, my practice is eyes open. So we happened to be pretty close to each other, to where his knee was in sight of where I was looking. And so for the next 30 minutes, I just watched him like tap his knee. And for me, the practice personally is not noting at all. For me personally, and then I'll kind of bring this into some other things, the practice is observation of sensation of breath. An awareness when a thought arises, but not giving any, attempting to not give any recognition or noting to the thought whatsoever. Just the awareness of the thought, which becomes the thing that just brings me back to the breath. So an example I often give is what I'm working on in my practice. Thought arises, say it's hunger. Just an awareness of the thought. Release it, back to breath. For me, what I learned from my master in Buddhist teachings was sensation of breath. Right? And the awareness of it, and that's it. Thought arises, hunger. Recognize, release, back to the breath. Recognize, release, back to breath. That thought of hunger might keep arising, but I'm using it just to kind of gently bring me back to the breath. Not giving it any story, any power. What I would consider noting, which is kind of like honoring the thought, I'm not even honoring it. This is what I'm practicing. What I don't want to do, for me, thought arises, hunger. No, hunger. I'm hungry. Okay. What do I want to eat? I want a burrito. I'd like chips. I'd like sauce. I'd like some cheese. I'm going to go to Pokies. I'd like some water. The next thing you know, from that single thought of hunger, I'm sitting there for 5 minutes thinking about a burrito. And now I'm hungrier than I was 5 minutes ago, right? So I'm personally not doing that. Just to expand also, since we were having a conversation downstairs about this, the practice that I was trained on was breath in, breath out, count 1. Breath in, breath out, count 2. Never lose focus. 1 to 10, then backwards, 10 to 1. 1 to 5, 5 to 1. When you finish that series, and if you lose focus anywhere, you start over. Oh, I'm at 6. Oh, lost focus. Back to 1. Right? 2. I lost focus again. Back to 1. So the first thing would be 1 to 10, 1 to 5, backwards, right? Second thing you do is breath in, breath out, count 1, but you visualize it. So you see the number being drawn. 1. Breath in, breath out. 2. I'm not literally doing this, but this is what I would see. Breath in, breath out. 3. 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 1. Then you would visualize it 1 in a color, red. Breath in, breath out, 2, red. Breath in, breath out, 3, red. So now I'm watching these colors of numbers being drawn. And the last stage would be same thing, but to see it expand. Breath in, breath out, 1, red. 2, red. 1 to 10. That's how I was trained. And it has worked for me. But as we've discussed, and for those who might be new, there's so many different types of meditation practices. Most of them are beneficial. You know, if there's one that says, go jump off a building, you should probably not do that one. But, you know, you could literally Google Buddhist meditation and you'll see like 5,000 things out there. Yeah. How do you, for you, noting it's a practice you've used?
Yeah. Well, in my meditation, what I would normally do is rising, falling of the stomach.
Yeah.
And then it would be rising, falling, touching, or sitting, and then rising, falling, and then the way I was taught was you would do rising, falling, sitting, and then touching one side of the body, and then rising, falling, sitting, and then touching the other side of the body, and then you go through all the way out to the legs to the back.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah. It's a beautiful practice. Yeah. Let me know when you want to lead. I'll teach you how to hit the bell properly, because if you don't hit the bell properly, everything's just messed up. You know? Thanks. Other questions? Okay, so there's a question here. Can we talk about Buddhism as a philosophy and not a religion? Thich Nhat Hanh says Buddhism is not a religion. Tibetan, and then there's a follow-up to that. Same person. Tibetans worship Buddha as a god, so to them, is it a religion? All right, let me just break this down for you in 2 minutes. Okay. The ever, all-knowing question of, is Buddhism a religion or a philosophy? These are my unenlightened views and opinions on this question after watching this for the last 20 plus years. Okay. Buddhism in America, in the West, Europe, Canada, for the most part overall, is practiced as a philosophy and a way of life. Buddhism in and of itself, for the last 2,500 years, is one of the world's oldest, largest religions. Now, there's 40 plus of you here. How many of you are here because you want some religious experience with Buddhism? Nobody. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a religion. It just means to you, it's not a religion. I can go back and forth in a couple things here. You look up the definition of religion, it'll be belief in a higher power, right? Buddhism doesn't have a belief in a higher power. The Buddha died 2,500 years ago. He cannot save you. He cannot help you. He is gone. You're on your own, my friends. Good luck. All right? But keep in mind, if you walk into a Taiwanese Buddhist temple a mile down the street, or a Thailand temple 2 miles down the street, or a Lao, or Cambodian, or Vietnamese, or Japanese, or Korean Buddhist temple, and you go into there and you say to them, this isn't a religion, this is a philosophy, it's kind of insulting. It's kind of like going to the Catholic Church across the street and saying that's not religion. So Buddhism is practiced predominantly in the West as a philosophy and a way of life. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed, was brilliant at bringing Buddhism into the Western world. And he was so smart to understand that, again, show of hands, how many of you in this room were raised Buddhist? I see 0 hands, okay? So what that tells us is we're not a culture with people that are predominantly raised Buddhist. We're a culture of people who come into Buddhism later in life, and what are we coming out of? Religion. And what are most people who come into Buddhism later in life not wanting to do? Religion. So why introduce it as a religion? Doesn't seem to. There's a word in Buddhism, upaya, means skillful means. Early on, the Japanese Buddhist tradition, they built what's called early 1900s, I believe, maybe late 1800s, Buddhist churches of America. At that time, they adopted the word church because they thought, well, we're in America now. let's just call Buddhism a church and then people will show up. I don't think that's working so well today. Ultimately, whether you call it a religion, whether you call it a philosophy, the reality is if Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, never even lived, and it's all just one big made-up story or cartoon, it's still beautiful. So it doesn't matter what you call it. I just caution very genuinely, because for me personally, it's a very devout religious practice. It is not at all how I share it. It's not the reason we built Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago was to actually take that out of Buddhist practice, because that was the tradition I came from, and it turned people off. Most people come into Buddhist places don't want to put on robes and shave heads and bow and chant in other languages. They want to go home and, figure out how to bring this stuff into their lay Western lives. So call it what you want. But I just caution people on their defense of well, it's not a religion, it's a philosophy. Yeah, not to millions and millions of Buddhists for thousands of years. It's a religion. People in America today, it's a philosophy and a way of life. Most people who practice Buddhism don't identify as Buddhist. And the beauty of it is Buddhists don't care. Right? Someone asked the Dalai Lama years ago, he said, does this country need more Buddhists? And he said, the world has enough Buddhists. Right? This country just needs more people that are peaceful and happy. So if being peaceful and happy comes from being Christian, then we should all be Christian. If it comes from being Catholic, Jewish, Mormon, pagan, whatever, just be happy, peaceful, and kind. Whatever religion you are. Years ago, a friend of mine, she is a devout Catholic, and she said that Buddhism, she considered it like a software upgrade. She said it actually brought her closer to her religious faith because it made her kinder and gentler and happier. And I think that's a beautiful application of Buddhist teachings. So hopefully that's helpful. To your comment about Tibetans worship Buddha as a god, yeah, many Asian countries and Asian Buddhist temples here, it's very devout, and they pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas religiously. Just because that doesn't work for one individual doesn't mean it doesn't work for them. So, Tibet, Buddhism is a religion. So. Well, I'm happy. Yeah, Pastor Miles, old Charger, Miles McPherson. Last comment here from Brad, same one, says, Pastor Miles at the Rock Church said Buddhism will enhance your Christianity. Jesus was known to also be an enlightened being as well. That's the general view of most scholars, which I'm not, around Buddhism, is that Jesus was a fully enlightened bodhisattva to help liberate all sentient beings from suffering. And like I said, for me, 17 years Dharma Bum Temple, we don't see Buddhists. We see Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Mormons, my Jewish tribal people. We see them all. So, yeah. Other questions?
Throughout the different branches of Buddhism, are they all the same bodhisattvas?
Well,
Or slightly different?
so the question is, throughout the different branches of Buddhism, are they all the same bodhisattvas? Yes and no. Yes, in that the schools of Buddhism that recognize bodhisattvas, they're all pretty much the same. But then there's traditions in school of Buddhism that don't recognize bodhisattvas. So it really just kind of depends where you're reading or studying. The Pali Canon, which is considered the original what I call old school teachings of the Buddha, Theravada Buddhism, which literally means of the elders, right? It was originally Hinayana, they called it lesser vehicle, Mahayana greater vehicle, but then they realized, I don't know, 100 years later, the council came together and said we shouldn't have one school of Buddhism called greater and the other one called lesser. So they changed it to Theravada to call it of the elders. And so this is based on the Pali Canon. And it's also interesting to point out that the Buddhist teachings, they were all memorized. It was an oral tradition. So what that meant was the Buddha would speak and everybody memorized everything. They weren't sitting there with like their iPads, writing this stuff down. It was all just memorized. And then somewhere it's debatable, 50 years, 100 years, somewhere after the time of the Buddha, they say that Ananda, one of the Buddhist disciples who had the greatest, recall memory, they came together and said, in essence, this is some important stuff, we should write it down. So they recited everything from memory and they transcribed them into palm leaves. And that's why the sutras, for the most part, all start out, thus have I heard at such and such place at such and such time, the Buddha once said. So what that means is even the Pali Canon is coming from a transmission of oral teachings, which doesn't mean it's wrong or not accurate. That's not why I say that. Just that it was memorized for a long time before they wrote it down. And then 500-600 years after the Buddha died, as Buddhism entered China, Japan, Korea, and North, you have the development of what's called Mahayana Buddhism. And that's where you have what's called the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and that's where the Bodhisattva teachings really come to play. So, yeah. And within those schools, the Bodhisattvas are all the same. Other question? Yeah, in the back.
In Tibet, when they turn the wheels and stuff like that, and they're doing prayers,
Yeah.
do they have a set, is there a book about the set prayers that they have that they're releasing? Prayers about compassion and stuff
Yes.
like that?
So the question you're asking about Tibetan prayer wheels. And for those who may or may not have seen them, Tibet, Nepalese region, Tibetan temples, you'll see, they call handheld prayer wheels. And you also see massive prayer wheels where you can just walk by and turn them. And actually to your left on that little shrine right there is a little mini prayer wheel in the middle. You'll see it. So I can't speak for every Tibetan prayer wheel that has ever existed, but very common and I'll go as far as to say most common. You'll see on there the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, which is the great compassion mantra of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And that prayer literally translates to the jewel in the lotus. But the idea is that as they turn the prayers, that turning of the prayer that's inside it is comparable to how someone may pray to God or whoever they're praying to. That the idea is that as you spin the wheel or turn the wheel, that circular motion is sending the prayer into the world. Same thing with Tibetan prayer flags. You see them hanging in the Himalayas and, in college dorm rooms and whatever. As the wind blows through them, the idea is that as the wind blows, it sends the prayers into the world. And so each flag, again, they're all very different, but it could be a flag that has a prayer for wisdom, long life, one for compassion, one for generosity, one for, different teachings. And the wind just sends all the prayers into the world. You'll have Tibetan lamas that will literally just turn the handheld prayer wheels for 50 years. I'm not even kidding. So, yeah, does that help? Yeah. It's a beautiful, again, such a religious practice. Tibetan Nepalese folks with Buddhist practice. 100%.
When they meditate in the temple, are they putting prayer, is it,
Do you mean, are they like sending the prayer into the wheel?
No, but that's what, when you're meditating and stuff like that, and you're like trying to, we're asking for compassion, we're trying to be compassionate, we're trying to wish for that, or meditate on that, and we're trying to send that compassion out to the world. Is that like?
Sure. I think in context of the question of the wheel, it's actually the opposite. The wheel's good. It's us that needs the compassion.
Right.
The wheel's just fine. Right? Totally fine on its own. It's like that old George Carlin skit on, saving the planet. If you've never seen it, just Google George Carlin and save the planet. He's like, the planet's fine. It's the people that are, I won't fill in that word right there, right? In case there's children watching. But the wheel in itself, and in fact, I don't think I mentioned this, but the idea is when you turn the prayer wheels, they go this way. And the idea is that it comes to you first. Right? You ever tried to love and care and send compassion to others, but really been pissed off and hate yourself? So if you lack compassion, self-love, self-compassion, self-care, how can we really care for others? So it always starts with self. Always. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts, questions?
You mentioned, responding to the first comment, that practice is what works for you.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by works for you?
Yeah, works is such a weird word because it works for me, but at the same time, it does nothing for me.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
wondering.
Let me clarify works. By works, I mean it does nothing for me. Truly. It does nothing.
So just pick a practice that you feel comfortable.
I think that's important. I'm just laughing because I'm still wrestling with trying to explain what I mean by it works and does nothing all at the same time. But I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Your comment, I think, is even better than what I would say. Is that yes, what's comfortable for you, right? And sometimes, depending upon how and where you're introduced to meditation or Buddhist practice, for me that was the first thing that I was introduced to, and it was comfortable for me. It worked for me. It did nothing for me. It made zero sense to me. It's like, what? Huh?
It's stuck.
It's stuck. And for others, you get introduced to like 15 different kinds. And, I think you want to balance a little bit to where, back to your comment before I lose track of that, being comfortable with the meditation practice, especially initially, is really important. Because you want to be able to practice it. And, I'm a fan of, somebody years ago said, if you're really into Zen practice, you should probably go into Tibetan Buddhism. If you're really into Tibetan Buddhism, you should probably check out Zen practice. Because what that teaching is saying is that what we're drawn to, what we're comfortable with, is feeding into our craving, our desires, our ego, and what we enjoy. And Buddhist practice is trying to kind of cut through that a little bit. But I still think personally early on for many people, by early on, I mean like your first 5 years, 10 years, you can dabble in a few different practices, but find ones that are comfortable for you. And then after a while, maybe just stick with that one a little bit. Because I think if you have like 8 different meditation practices and you're just jumping and jumping and jumping, it can be even more challenging. So I do think the comfort is important. And by works, I think that, coming back to that, because I do think this is an important point, is that for me, it wasn't about my meditation practice getting better. I don't view meditation as something that gets better. You're just sitting and you're breathing. That's it. If you can sit and breathe better one day than the next, I'm not even sure what that means. There's only worse. And worse is no sitting, no breathing. And then you don't have to worry about meditation anymore. So just breathe. But where I see really changed, not just in my life, but, being around community so long, is people begin to see differences outside of meditation. So if you're sitting down, especially if you're newer to meditation, and you're like, okay, I want to get really good at meditation. What good does being good at meditation do you? If you're still pissed off the moment you walk outside the door. I heard the expression years ago, an angry person who meditates is just an angry meditator. So it's really about how is your life transforming off the cushion, outside of meditation. And when you see that you're less reactive, less responsive, less emotional, less caught up in everybody else's drama and crap and misery, and you're being kinder and more compassionate to yourself, more loving to yourself, more forgiving to yourself and others, the meditation will have a part in that, right? Read Buddhist teachings, meditate, spend time with Sangha, these things that, it's called the triple gem for a reason, right? The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. And meditation is a huge piece of that. You can meditate without Buddhist practice, but you can't really have Buddhist practice without meditation. But now that I have played up, does that make sense so far? Now that I've played up meditation so much, and I'll kind of close with this thought, I also want to point out that when you look at the Eightfold Path, right? Buddhist teachings, Four Noble Truths, life is dukkha, filled with suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. The second one, the cause, greed, anger, ignorance, craving, desire, attachment. Your third one is ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation, cessation from cravings. And the fourth is the path, the Eightfold Path, having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. The Buddha laid out simple 8 steps, just 8, right? 8 things you have to do to be a fully awakened, kind, compassionate person. You know where meditation and concentration is on that list? The end. So, as I always say, free meditation, everybody wants that, but free morality class? No. Free honesty class? Right? People don't want that very often. They want to just meditate, make all their problems go away like it's a Calgon bubble bath or something like that, Must cultivate the first 6 steps on the Eightfold Path. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. And you balance that with, I'm not saying ignore the meditation until you figured out the rest, because then you'd never get to meditation, but use them to balance each other out. But my suggestion always is not to think that the meditation is, that's it. That if you just meditate, everything's going to get better. So, all right, I'm going to close on that. There's a question here, is Taoism the same as Buddhism? No. Both beautiful, but both different. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, so just a few quick announcements before y'all head out. I'm Robin, our Dharma Bum host. And Brad, real quick to your question on Buddhism and Taoism. When Buddhism went into China, it meshed with Taoism in the local culture. So different, but they play very nicely together.
Hello, everyone. I'm tonight's host, Robin. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to help close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you all. Thanks, Brad, for all the questions.